a Nordic Noir short novel. 1. The Lake That Doesn't Forget. The bus from Helsinki left before dawn, winding north through a blur of pines and frozen lakes. By the time Elias Laine stepped off at the stop marked Kalliojärvi, the sun had not yet broken through the clouds. Everything was grey, the sky, the snow, even the timber walls of the few houses that huddled around the narrow road. He carried only a canvas bag, his camera slung over one shoulder. Officially, he was there for a photography series, The Last Villages of Finland, a quiet project for a Helsinki magazine that no one really read. Unofficially, Elias had come to escape a life that had quietly collapsed beneath him. His father had died 3 months ago. They hadn't spoken in years. The air was dry, bitter. He could smell the lake before he saw it, cold iron and birch bark. Locals said Kalliojärvi never truly froze, that there were currents below that kept a single black patch open all winter. Some said it breathed. Elias thought that sounded like something his father might have said. 2. The innkeeper. The only place to stay was a wooden inn by the road. Its owner, Helmi Koskinen, was in her 60s, with the sharp eyes of someone who noticed everything but spoke of nothing. She gave Elias a key without asking why he'd come. "Dinner at 6, she said. "You'll be the only guest." The room smelled faintly of smoke and damp wool. A single framed photograph hung above the bed, a family by the lakeshore, a man, woman, and a boy of about 12. The image was faded, but something in the boy's face looked oddly familiar. At dinner, Elias asked about it. "That was my family," Helmi said. "My husband drowned in that lake 20 years ago. My son, he left soon after." Her tone made it clear there was more to the story, but Elias didn't press. He'd come to capture the quiet desolation of places like this, not to disturb their ghosts. Still, that night, he dreamed of a boy standing by dark water, calling a name he couldn't hear. 3. The stranger at the store. The next day, Elias walked to the small general store by the post road. Snow fell in thick, wet clumps. Inside, the woman behind the counter, middle-aged, guarded, looked him up and down before asking, "You're staying with Helmi?" "Yes," Elias said, "just for a week, photographing the area." She hesitated, then said softly, "Be careful around the lake." "It doesn't take kindly to strangers." Elias tried to smile, but she didn't return it. Outside, a man in a dark parka stood by an old Volvo, smoking. He watched Elias with flat eyes, then flicked his cigarette into the snow. "Not much to photograph here," he said in Finnish, "unless you're looking for the ghosts." Before Elias could respond, the man climbed into his car and drove off toward the forest road that led to the lake. 4. The lake. Elias spent the afternoon by the shore. The water was motionless except for a single dark patch near the center where the ice had cracked. He set up his tripod, trying to frame the faint mist that hovered above it. When he developed the images later in his laptop, one frame made him stop cold. In the reflection of the ice, near the black patch, was what looked like a shape. A figure standing on the far side of the lake. He zoomed in, but the image broke into grain and shadow. That night, wind howled through the pines. Something knocked against the window. Maybe a branch, maybe not. 5. Stories by firelight. Helmi was waiting downstairs with coffee when he came down. "You went to the lake," she said, not asking. Elias nodded. "It's beautiful, but heavy." She gave a long sigh. "They say it holds what we try to forget. My husband, Arto, he used to fish there, even in winter. The ice broke beneath him one February night. They never found his body." "I'm sorry," Elias said quietly. Helmi looked toward the window, where snow drifted past like ash. Some say he didn't fall. Some say he walked in. Elias didn't ask why. He didn't need to. There was a weight in her voice that spoke of 100 unsaid things. 6. The journal. The next morning, Elias found an old notebook under the loose floorboard near his bed. The first page was dated 2004. The handwriting was neat, hesitant, a child's hand. They said not to go to the lake, but father was angry again. He said I was weak. I saw him take the boat that night. Mother was crying. The entries continued, shorter, darker. The ice cracked, but he kept walking. They don't talk about it in town. Mother says the lake keeps secrets. The last entry read simply, I saw him yesterday. Standing on the ice, he was looking at me. The signature at the bottom was a single name, Anna. 7. Anna, Elias asked around the village that day. Few would speak, but one old man outside the gas station finally did. Helmi's boy? Anna? He left after his father died, moved south, came back once, stayed a night, then gone again. Strange boy, always walking by the lake. When was that? Elias asked. The old man frowned. A year ago, maybe less. But the strange thing is, Helmi swore she hadn't seen him, said he never came. 8. The photograph. That evening, Elias went through his photos again. He stopped at the one from the lake, the faint figure on the far shore. He noticed something new this time. Zoomed in, it wasn't just a shape. It was a young man, wearing the same jacket as the boy in the photo on Helmi's wall, only older. Elias printed it out and brought it downstairs. Helmi, he said carefully, who is this? She stared at the picture for a long time, her face unreadable. Then she whispered, That's my son. That's Anna. But this was taken 2 days ago, Elias said. You said he left. Helmi's eyes stayed on the photo. He did. 9. The storm. That night a storm rolled over the forest. The inn shook with wind and sleet. Around midnight Elias heard footsteps on the porch, slow, deliberate. He went to the window but saw only snow swirling in the dark. Then came the sound, soft, steady, someone walking toward the lake. He grabbed his coat and flashlight and stepped outside. The wind bit through his gloves. Down the hill, a dim figure moved across the frozen surface of Kalliojärvi, heading toward the black patch in the ice. Anna, he shouted without thinking. The figure stopped, turned. For a moment Elias saw his own reflection in the beam, pale face, dark hair, and then the ice cracked. The figure vanished beneath the water. By the time he reached the edge, there was only the hiss of wind and the groan of shifting ice. 10. The morning after. When Elias woke, the storm had passed. He couldn't remember coming back inside. His boots were still wet by the door. Helmi was making coffee. She looked tired but calm. You shouldn't go near the lake, she said quietly. It doesn't let go. He showed her the footprints in the snow. Only one set, his own. Helmi looked at him for a long moment, then said, It's better not to ask too many questions, Elias. People here live with their ghosts. She poured him a cup of coffee and left the room. 11. The departure. 2 days later, Elias packed his bag. The photos on his camera were strange, blurred, fogged, as if light itself had bent around them. At the bus stop, he looked back once more. The lake glimmered under a thin sun, still and silver. A shape stood on the far bank, too far to make out clearly, but tall, motionless. Watching, the bus engine growled. When he looked again, the figure was gone. 12th epilogue. Months later in Helsinki, the magazine never ran his story. The editor said the images were technically flawed. Elias hung one of them on his wall anyway. The photograph of Kalliojärvi, the dark hole in the ice, and a faint silhouette at its edge. Sometimes, in the half-light of dawn, he thought he could see ripples spreading outward from that black center, as if something beneath the surface was still breathing. End.